Success has eluded a lot of the part of Africa, and it's not for lack of trying or lack of resource. There's been something which has been missing. Perhaps it's a coordination or a collation of a number of other issues which has eluded us. So it's very important that agricultural development becomes successful. I think the biggest obstacle will be to convince the policymaker or whoever is responsible to believe in what is happening, and that you need this new dispensation to move ahead. So it's a question of getting the non-believers to believe in a document.
I think it's always good to look back at examples both of success but also where projects haven't worked or programs of intervention haven't brought the result that you hoped. By looking at practical examples, you can tease out from them some of the lessons that you can then take forward into the future. I think the future that food production faces at the moment is really quite uncertain, partly as a result of this extraordinary volatility in both food and commodity prices, but also the price of oil, partly because of the challenges of climate change. Those two things together mean that we have to think hard about how a world of 9 billion people by 2050 is going to be fed. So by looking backwards, I hope we can take some lessons forwards to help us solve some of those challenges.
I think gender is extremely important, differentiating the roles of men and women and indeed children on the farm. Women historically and in most cultures in which I'm familiar in Africa play a very important role both in cultivation and particularly in looking after small animals such as goats and chickens, for example. And so targeting intervention specifically on them is very, very important to make sure the right people are getting the right skills and advice that they need.
My background is in agricultural research, and particularly been related to plant breeding research for many years, and so I'm quite interested in how plant breeding research has evolved over time and some of the big impacts that it has had in yield potential and disease resistance, or in general in yield dependability. Now moving more into sort of impacts from biotechnology and ever more what I call stress tolerance breeding, which will be very important, I think, for well, it's important for marginal areas, but it will also be important for climate change.
Climatic change. Obviously, that will have an impact. And out of this meeting, I think some ways and means will be found as interventions to address the problem of energy crisis. There is water, which is also very important. Energy, again, that will have an impact on food production, food availability, food distribution. And finally, changes in population dynamics. Population is changing. There are major shifts of population from rural to urban. Therefore, in fact, changes in population dynamics, its distribution will also have an impact in food supply and food distribution.
Policymakers need to know that certain things work. And when it comes to agriculture, it's important to especially focus on that. We're talking about food security. We're talking about numbers of people who are malnourished increasing. So we need to act and act fast. And a lot of things are being done, but not everything is visible.
At one time, people thought that the food security problem has been over, particularly for Asia. The Africa, the concerns are still there. but over the last 2 years we have seen that this is a problem which will continue as long as the population increases. And we can never be complacent about generating supply in order to meet the demand.
The idea of learning from success stories from the past, I think it's really great. My field is science communication, so any opportunity to make sure that relevant science that can make a difference, get out to a wider audience is really exciting for me. And I think it's with the expertise that have joined together for this project, it's really going to be an exciting project.
It's always been very important to invest in agriculture, although many governments have forgotten about that. But what happened in the last actually at the middle of 2008, was a way of, the world was alerting us that the demand for food was increasing faster than supply, and that then new efforts were needed to ensure the well supply of food.
Traditionally, a lot of the programs for agricultural development have been focused on production and creating or producing more food for the population. But in many cases, they have forgotten the welfare of farmers. So farmers are producing food, but they are not necessarily getting better off. No? So I think when we talk about agricultural development, it should be something that's good for all sectors, including the farmers. And it must also be sustainable so that the benefits from improved production and farmer welfare are carried on over the years.
I think this is the time to communicate in a deeper way, and it is this time of globalization is different from last time, which you already learned a lot in terms of how to communicate. So my belief is if we can really communicate well, rationally, and we can really avoid the disaster we had in the last century.